Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, I'm back to our regular Zettelkasten people, those who are down the road a bit with their Zettelkasten creations, and I am answering a question, or I should say pondering a question, that was brought up by Jean-Luc yesterday. And it's a rather interesting one because he's asking the question, where in a Zettelkasten should a conversation take place? If you've been following my podcast, you know that I've been talking for a while about conversations and how important they are in a Zettelkasten. I think they're the real substance of Zettelkasten. And so he asks a very important question of where should they take place. I was explaining the directory cards and how a directory card holds a conversation, but he was questioning that and wondering, well, aren't the real conversations contained in the threads, the cards that go down a chain, rather than on a directory card? And I thought that was definitely worth pondering, and I came up with a couple of answers very quickly and a couple more when I thought about it a bit, but I'm still not convinced that I've gotten to the bottom of this question. So consequently, I've made it a card to ponder, but I thought I would share what I've come up with so far and invite you folks to ponder the question as well, and maybe you'd like to supply some of your ideas in the comments. Well, I took two detailed examples from this book by Scott P. Schepper, and they began in his famous chapter 11 where he sets up his Zettelkasten and he goes through a number of pages and he ends up establishing his first conversation in a Zettelkasten by way of an example to get people going. This is an excellent book. If you don't have it in your library, you might well want one. I think his numbering system is a bit overly complex. I prefer my own, but this book is very rich, and I think it's definitely worth having in your library, and the best place to get it is at scottshepard.com if you want it. So let's head on over to the down-facing camera. I'll go over two of the answers that I came up with in some detail, and then two more that we're just going to kind of discuss in passing. And then I'm going to throw it open to you folks to answer your idea of where should a conversation take place in a Zettelkasten. So head on over to the down-facing camera with me. See you over there. Okay, I'm going to be looking at two threads of conversation coming out of an example that Scott Schepper gives in his book, where he begins with the very first cards that he recommends people put into their Zettelkasten. So we're going to look at two different conversations that come out of these same cards that Scott recommends that we put in. Recommends that we all begin with arts and humanities as a 1000 card, and then that we proceed on with social sciences at the 2000, natural sciences for 3000, formal sciences for 4000, applied arts and sciences for 5000. If I were to put just arts and humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, formal sciences, applied arts and sciences down on a list, I would not have a conversation. Titles don't form conversations. You need complete sentences to form conversations. So I created this directory card, and don't ask me why I grabbed a white card, but having done so and having written all those words, I was not in the mood to change it out for pink, yellow, or blue. So we're sticking with white, but pretend it's a colored card because it's a directory card. So this particular directory card doesn't have a card number. It's a card that precedes all of these. And since none of these has anything that comes in front, we'll just have to say that this card has the null card number. And I've given it its own tagline. Human knowledge is enriched in myriad dimensions. And then I've taken each of these fields of study that Scott Schepper recommends we include as categories, and I've included a full tagline to go with each. And I would submit to Jean-Luc that this constitutes a completely valid conversation. You can actually picture the heads of these different departments at a university sitting around a table discussing how you should chop up a marvelous gift that was just given to the university without specific strings attached as to where it should go. And they're all sitting around discussing, where should this wonderful gift, the dollar value of it, go? And they're all giving their reasons why their system of study is the most important. And this would make a perfectly fine conversation. So that's one of the two conversations that we're going to get out of this example that Scott gives us of conversations in a Zettelkasten. The next example, we're going to follow down a thread as Jean-Luc suggests and as Scott Shepherd does for us. We're going to track down this 4,000 thread. We're going to start with this card for 4,000, and I built it out the way I would build a normal main card in my system, rather than just doing something like Scott said, where all you have is a subject title and a card number. I don't care for that kind of card. To me, they're dead. They don't participate in conversation. So my substitute card is a full main card with information about what formal science is and means, my reaction to it, and a tagline. I've done the same with this card, 4212, on information theory. I've given its definition, my reaction, and a full tagline, but I've created the very card that Scott suggests that we create. Now I'm ready to add the Lumen card. Again, I've given it the number Scott suggested. I didn't use the whole card because I kind of felt that this initial opening quote was so valuable in its own right that I didn't want to crowd it out with the rest of the card. So I just stopped right there. One of the most basic presumptions of communication is that partners can mutually surprise each other. Only in this way can information be produced in the other. That's a famous Nicholas Luhmann quote. And now I would respond to that by talking about that, oh, sure, for surprise to happen, there must be a solid base of information that's common to both. Then the unexpected element, the surprise element, stands out. For example, a child learns that an ugly caterpillar turns into a beautiful butterfly. Caterpillars and butterflies are known, and that one turns into the other is new and surprising. So you can't have all surprise. You need a mix of known and surprise. And so that was my tagline. Communication requires a mix of surprise and familiarity. So now let's assemble this into what we might call a classic Zettelkasten conversation, the kind that Jean-Luc suggests as being the most proper kind of conversation in a Zettelkasten. And indeed, if we hold all the taglines together, we can make a very fine conversation out of this thread. So now we've explored two places in a Zettelkasten that we can find a conversation. We can find a conversation in a directory card, and we can find a conversation in a thread of adjacent cards. Where else might we find a conversation in a Zettelkasten? Well, one extra place is on the bib card notes that we take while reading a particular book. This type of conversation is a conversation that the book carries on with itself, or possibly with the reader if you've injected other notes as you've read along. So that's yet a third place that a Zettelkasten has conversation. Here's a fourth place that Zettelkasten can carry on a conversation. When you've promoted a key word to a card by itself, all of the references on this card contain the same keyword surprise. If these are all taglines, then they're carrying on a conversation. And it's a conversation that this one might well want to join since it includes surprise in its tagline. Well, in the short time that I was videoing that segment, I came up with a fifth. I'm not going to mention it here because I've invited you to include your thoughts in the comments. Where do you think a conversation should be found in a Zettelkasten? I've kind of come to the conclusion that a Zettelkasten should have a conversation wherever you can find one. And there might be a lot of places to find one in a Zettelkasten. I want to close by sharing a quote with you from Martin Silcock, and he left this in a comment to one of my videos. So now he's got a quote bib card in my system. And what he says is that a Zettelkasten is a way of thinking about relating ideas to each other that leaves a trail of index cards organized in boxes. I thought he really nailed it with this one. So thank you, Martin. So if doing a Zettelkasten is a way of relating ideas to one another, that's just another way of saying having a conversation. So that would kind of imply to me that any way that you can relate ideas to one another in your Zettelkasten is a way of having a conversation in your Zettelkasten. And that's why I think conversations are so crucial, so central to the very meaning of a Zettelkasten. Talk to you later. And thank you, Jean-Luc, for your wonderful question. I am still pondering it because I'm not convinced I've thought this one all the way through. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.